Welcome to the Business and Society podcast. I'm your host, Senthil. Every fortnight, we take a topic at the intersection of business and society and discuss it with some of the most influential thinkers and practitioners. Today's episode is a conversation I recorded with Zach Mercurio. Zach is a researcher, author, and leadership development facilitator specializing in purposeful leadership and meaningful work. Zach has advised leaders at organizations like the US Army, Delta Airlines, Marriott, and JP Morgan Chase. In this episode, we dive into his latest book, The Power of Mattering: How Leaders Can Create a Culture of Significance. We are exploring how leaders can help people feel truly seen, valued at work. Hey, Zach, such a pleasure to connect with you today. Look, I was reading your HBR article. It very personally resonated to me. I started my career as a frontline executive in consumer goods space. I was just reflecting after reading your columns, like, when did I feel great about work? When did I feel low point? Then I realized, it's at a time when someone shown me that I matter. So, this was that idea. So as soon as I finished that article, I sent you a text and I said, hey, I read this. This is awesome. I ought to talk to you.
Isn't it interesting? We put all these sophisticated questionnaires out. We studied that. I think it was 1,500 people, 22 different industries. We were trying to understand, what are the behaviors that contribute to feelings of, not only mattering, but motivation, meaningfulness, lower turnover. And we were just shocked that there were very small interactions with people, very small interactions with leaders. I mean, it could have been a very small moment after a meeting in which a leader gave you some feedback that helped you see something in yourself that you didn't see, that made the choice for you to stay in the career path you were on. And it's time and time again. It wasn't perks, it wasn't pay, it wasn't promotions, it wasn't these little things, these little interactions. And I feel, as we've been thinking about this and looking at what's going on, if that interactional level of organizations, that interactional level of work has been, I think, overlooked. But I'm glad you resonate. I'm glad you felt that too, because we asked that question, and I asked, when do you most feel that you matter in work? And I'll ask it on a chat. I was on a event. There was 2,000 people on there. The organizer was like, do you really want to open up the chat? I was like, yeah, of course. So it said, open up the chat. 2,000 responses. Someone remembered my name and something about my family. These are people who have been in these careers, high-performing people, for decades. When someone complimented me on the quality of something I did. It was so small. And so it just surprises me every time I go out and ask people that question. And then the goal is translating that into action amongst leaders. But I'm glad it resonated with you.
Definitely did. And the instant thought that comes to someone's mind is, hey, when it is mattering, it's about money. It seems like your research is very clear that it's about money, not the top variable. Is that correct?
Yeah, compensation. The word compensate, all it means is to make up for. So when you compensate someone, you're making up for the lost time and skill that they give to you. Because money is an inanimate object, it can't actually value a person. So it can be a symbol of value. Like, I'm symbolizing how much I value you by how much I'm compensating you, how much skill you're giving me. But it can't actually value a person. Only a person can value a person. The same thing with a perk. Like, a perk can be a symbol of value, but it can't value a person. And I think that this is where a lot of organizations have gone wrong, is that we've invested a lot in symbols of value without investing rigorously in designing the daily experience of feeling valued. Because, you can have programs, perks, pay, all of those symbols of value, but those things cannot make up for you going into work every day and feeling overlooked, ignored, like your effort doesn't matter. People realize over time that caring is costly. Caring without feeling cared for is costly. And people typically withdraw, they withhold effort when they don't have these daily experiences. So I think the symbols are great. Money is good. It's important for people to be able to pay a wage that's commensurate with their experience, but it merely compensates. It cannot actually value a person. And this is it's not just my work. It's, you see research all the way back to the 70s with Frederick Herzberg, sort of the father of work motivation research. And he finds very clearly that money can only create a not dissatisfied employee.
Mm.
Right. So money can create job satisfaction. That's how good I feel about my job. But a not dissatisfied employee is not a motivated employee.
No.
And motivation comes from purpose. I know that what I'm doing matters. Relationships, I have someone that supports me. Availability, I know that I have the resources to do my job. I have some autonomy. Those are very well-known predictors of motivation. But money is maybe a predictor of satisfaction. It's not a predictor of sustained energy.
So money is just like a baseline. So you got to do a lot of work.
Yeah,
beyond that.
Herzberg calls it hygiene, and I love that word because it's just like brushing your teeth doesn't make you healthy.
Right.
Right. For an organization, just giving someone money or benefits or even decent wages, healthcare, schedules that are predictable, those things are hygiene. It's what people expect. It's basic hygiene. But just because you brush your teeth every day doesn't mean you're healthy. And so a lot of organizations overinvest in hygiene factors and underinvest in true motivational factors, of which the experience of knowing that you and what you're doing are significant is one of the strongest predictors of motivation. I mean, think about the last time that you were energized. And that's all motivation is, it's energy. Think about the last time you were energized to do something when you felt that you or it didn't matter.
Mm. Yeah. I can't think of any.
It's very
Definitely
hard.
moment.
It's
Yeah.
very hard.
Yeah.
So a lot of leaders want that energy. They want the outcomes of that energy, but they're less willing to rigorously invest in making sure the leading indicator of that energy is happening, which is making sure people feel valued so they can add value.
That's beautiful. Let's get into the technicalities of this term mattering in a minute. But look, I'm just wondering, what is that moment when you realize, oh, this is something I want to study about? Because there's so many jargons and acronyms and leadership literature. You know that. But what is that moment when you realize, wow, this is something I want to work on and write such an excellent book?
Well, yeah, I know there's a lot of phrases, a lot of concepts, a lot of theories, a lot of approaches, but this is something that I couldn't let go of, or it wouldn't let me go.
Right.
And I tried for 5 years to let it go. I tried every way I could to try to imagine a world in which the need to matter was not the leading indicator of all human behavior. Right. And fulfilling that need. And I couldn't as I read more and more and more. And this all started for me as I was a PhD student. I was doing a study with university janitors. So custodians who clean were in a very difficult job, often invisible by virtue of their shifts. I mean, we schedule custodians to come in when people aren't there. They're almost scheduled to be unseen. And it's really difficult work. It's often dirty work. And so we wanted to know, okay, if we could figure out what makes work meaningful in that context, we can really translate this into other contexts. So we went and embedded ourselves with a small group of janitors for 1.5 years. And we cleaned with them and we were trying to understand what made work meaningful for them. And I remember one custodian who told me that she was there for 20 years. She told me that the time when she most felt that her work was meaningful, that helped to keep her going, was when a student in one of the dormitories remembered her name
Oh,
and just said, "Hey, Susan, I'm glad you're here today." And she remembers that. It's good to see you. And then over time, we started hearing more of that. these small little moments, right? Where someone felt seen, where a supervisor heard somebody, remembered something about their personal life, checked in on them. We started digging into these things. And then the employees, the custodians that seemed to, be on their phones during our interviews or not really wanting to be there, they didn't really have many of those moments. And we started to call those things moments of mattering. And then we went and we surveyed 1,000 people over 22 different industries on the leadership behaviors that contribute to meaningfulness and mattering, and then sustained motivation, engagement, a lot of those indicators. And what we found it wasn't big actions, it was very small interactions, again, in which people felt seen, heard, valued, and needed. And then this was during that time where more people than ever were reporting they felt overlooked, they felt invisible in work. We've invested in well-being programs, DEI programs. I mean, all of these programs and initiatives to try to get engagement up. And engagement's the lowest in 2025, is the lowest it's been in a decade. Despite wage increases of an average of 42% across industries in the last 8 years, which I know with inflation isn't great, but it's not bad. It's pretty good. But nothing's worked. And we said to ourselves, like, there's a name for this, and it's called the experience of mattering. It's like a meta need that underlies all our other needs. That need to feel important, the need to feel significant, the need to know that we're valued and that we add value to the people around us. And as we were testing the idea and talking about it, I think that what came about was people said, "Oh yeah, I feel like I belong in my workplace. I feel included, but I feel like no one would miss me if I was gone. I feel that, I can contribute. I'm doing really cool work." Or even like, I remember I had a surgeon for a hospital said, "I have a job that matters, but what I've realized is that I don't experience mattering in my job." I had a teacher who said, "I have a job that I love, but I don't feel loved in my job." And it's that experience of mattering to the people around you in your work that has degraded over the past 10, 20, 30 years, and is what we've studied in terms of how we can get it back.
Through those stories, I think you beautifully explain what mattering is. Did you say the engagement at workplaces are at all-time low?
Yeah, so it's Gallup released their report, and they've been doing this for a number of years, but they released their report in early 2025. And found that, if we all listeners right now, we're an organization, about 7 out of 10 of us on average across occupations would be emotionally uninvested in our work. In 2024, WorkHuman did a study that found that 30% of people feel flat out ignored or quote unquote invisible at work. The American Psychological Association has been studying feelings of being valued in work for years, and they find that on average for the last 20 years, it's been about 65% of people feel undervalued in work. But there's a couple of data points that are interesting in the latest engagement report from Gallup that kind of got overlooked in all the press releases, but they're really important for the modern leader to understand. In that sample, it was over 15,000 people. In that sample, just 39% of people could strongly agree that someone at work cared for them as a person. That's down almost 15 percentage points since 2020. Just 30% of people said that someone at work saw and invested in their unique potential. That's down almost 12% from 2020. So what's happening is not at the programmatic or organizational level when it comes to engagement. It seems to be at the interactional level. People are having lower quality interactions in which they feel cared for. And the result is that, it's very hard for someone to care if they don't feel cared for. And that's what engagement is care. And more people than ever don't feel cared for by the people around them.
It's more like a chain reaction, isn't it? I don't experience, I cannot exhibit. I just want to get this idea very clear, the mattering. You used a few other terms called being valued at work or belonging at work, which you wrote about. Help us understand how this idea is unique than, like other terms, caring for or getting care at work or whatever.
So there's 3 major terms that are often used a lot in this realm. Belonging is one, inclusion is another one, right? So to belong is to feel part of something, to feel welcomed and connected in a group. Belonging is being picked for the team, let's say. Inclusion is being able to take an equitable, active role in a group, having a pathway to take an active role in a group. Inclusion is being asked to play in the game. So
Right.
mattering is feeling that the team wouldn't be complete without you. Mattering is feeling significant to individuals in that group. There are two sides of mattering. There's a psychologist named Isaac Prilatensky who's theorized around this. But there are two experiences that induce mattering, that experience of feeling significant to those around you, feeling valued by them and adding value to them and knowing how we add value to them. And so when you talk about things like feeling valued or feeling cared for, those are mechanisms that create that feeling valued side of mattering. When you talk about things like someone has purpose, they see how they're contributing in work, you're talking about the adding value part of mattering, but the core need is the need to matter, to be important.
That's excellent. And you assert both in your book and the Harvard Business Review article, mattering is a primal need. Or you're saying mattering is fundamentally human. That sounds great. Is there a scientific
Sounds
research?
great.
That's it sounds great. I'm just wondering, is there a scientific research that backs this assertion? If so, could you talk about it?
Sure. I mean, scientists find that your first act as a human being, like when you're born, the first reflex you're born with, you actually reach out your hands in a hugging motion and you grasp for somebody. And we're encoded with all of these instincts in which we grasp for somebody, because we would not be here right now listening to this podcast if at some point we hadn't mattered enough to another person so that person would keep us alive. So that it is a survival instinct to be important to a person. And as we grow up, that survival instinct to matter turns into this fundamental need to feel seen, heard, valued, and needed. And you can look at a lot of different scientific studies to see that manifest. For example, self-determination theory, the predictors of human energy. You'll see things like having supportive relationships, knowing how you add value, having a bigger sense of purpose, having self-efficacy, believing that you're capable, believing that you and your actions can make a difference in some way. I'm sure the listeners are probably catching on that all of those things are outcomes of mattering. Because when we feel that we matter to other people, there's two beliefs that we develop: self-esteem, the belief that I'm worthy; self-efficacy, the belief that I'm capable. Those two beliefs, management researchers find that those two beliefs are most predictive of productivity and performance over the long term. The belief that I'm worthy, the belief that I'm capable. The more we develop self-esteem and self-efficacy, the more we develop the confidence we need to add value. The more we add value, the more we feel valued. And that's that upward spiral. But it goes all the way back to that survival instinct. It's as well known of an instinct as the instinct is to eat or to sleep. In fact, some scientists say that we actually reach to matter to someone else before we search for food. Because we wouldn't get food if we weren't important to someone.
Right.
And if you think about it, and you can do some non-scientific, just thought experiments, you probably wouldn't have done much of anything today. Get out of bed, have a drink of water, do this podcast, read a book, if you didn't believe at some small level that your life was worthy of your unrelenting energy. Like, we have to believe that it matters and we matter enough to carry forward. And that's why I say mattering, the need to matter, having that need met, seems to animate all human behavior.
Right. I totally concur with it. You flagged a quote from T.S. Eliot, which is similar. Like, I'm unable to recollect it, but if you have in memory, you could.
To be of importance is to be alive.
Lovely. To be of importance is to be alive. So the idea of mattering goes beyond work. Though your book is for workplaces, I think it touches on many aspects of life, isn't it?
Yeah, I work in workplaces because that's where the people are.
Right.
It's one of the most ubiquitous human experiences. We all work. We all have to work in some aspect at some point in our lives. And so one of the only places in the world in which you could touch every single human being is within the context of work. I sometimes don't think leaders in the workplace really understand that. Like really grasp the weight of the fact that you're responsible for where a human being spends about 1/3 of their one waking life. At work. We spend about 1/3 of our waking time at work. So if you're listening right now and you're like, well, it's just a job. I pay people to do their job and go home. You're not just paying people to do their job that come home. You're responsible for a place where a human being with people who love them, with a life as vivid and complex and as important as your own, leaves who they love to come spend 1/3 of their one life.
That stimulates some deep thinking in me.
What are you
I
thinking
think
about? What's coming to
a
your
lot.
mind?
When you're talking about newborn reaching out, I was just thinking of my 6-month-old daughter. Just I was visualizing when you're explaining that,
Yeah,
like as soon as she born, you can see like carry me.
that reflex or like tilting the head back, like we're encoded to tilt our head back at like a particular angle to be able
Right,
to make eye contact with somebody.
definitely.
And
Yeah,
that instinct, it's a survival instinct. It does not go away as we age. A lot of our survival instincts actually turn into psychological needs.
right.
And that's like, and now imagine the absolute panic of like your 6 months old reaching out and finding no one. The same visceral panic when we feel overlooked, ignored, the same panic. It's not the same as a child, but it's that same stress, that stress of insignificance that usually either causes us to withdraw, like quiet quitting or leaving an organization, or at work, silence, withholding, or it causes us to be really desperate. Gossip, complaining, blaming, bullying amongst children are often the result of an attention deficit. People aren't getting the attention that they desperately need as people, so they try to get it in other ways. A lot of the division we see, especially here in the West, here in the United States, a result of an overlooked group of people who feels ignored, and then someone or something or some brand or some product says, no, 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 I see you, and they grasp on for significance.
Right. You you break this topic down, mattering into a simple model called NAN. You call it as noticed, affirmed, and needed. Talk us through about this, and I'll really appreciate if you could tell stories. And your book is full of
Yeah.
beautiful stories, so it'll be amazing to hear that from you.
Yeah. So, if I were to ask everybody here listening, when have you most felt that you matter to another person in your work or in your life? It's very likely that you'll describe one of three things happening: feeling seen and heard, feeling that someone paid attention to you, they remembered something about you, they showed compassion for you, they heard you, they asked for your opinion, right? That's that feeling of being noticed, of having someone pay attention to us, have someone hear our voice. Or you might think of someone who illuminated something in you that you didn't see in yourself. So they named a specific strength that you had or a gift that you had, or they told you that it made a difference. Or you might be just thinking about a time where somebody said, I need your help. We need your help to solve this problem, or we're relying on you to do this. Or some people say to me when they felt like they mattered in their life, it was when they became a caretaker or because that need to feel needed, right? So those are those three areas: noticed, affirmed, and needed. And one of the things that we find is that mattering in those practices, they happen in moments, not usually in big programs. Good leaders tell people that they matter, but great leaders tend to show them exactly how they matter and have practices to do so. I'll give you one of my favorite examples was from a big distribution center, and they scored really low on their employee engagement surveys. But there was one outlier. There was one team of about 27 people who scored consistently over 5 years, very high in a very difficult occupation in which wages are a real issue. And we went to this group and I just interviewed them and I said, I love outliers. I said, what's going on here? What are you all doing? What's happening on this team? And they just were like, oh, we just love our supervisor. We'd do anything for her. And so I went to her and I said, what do you do here? And she said, Zach, it's actually relatively simple. I just noticed that 3 years ago, I was not paying attention enough to the details of people's work. I wasn't remembering if they complained about something. I wasn't remembering if I told them I'd get a piece of equipment fixed. I wasn't remembering these things about them. And so I got this notebook. I bought this notebook, and on Friday I started this ritual for myself where I just write down each of my team members' names. And then that week I write down one thing I want to remember about them from that week weekly. So if a piece of equipment wasn't working and the person gave them feedback, she would write it down. If the person was going on vacation that weekend, she would write it down. If the person was nervous about a meeting, she would write it down. And she goes, I've been doing this for 3 years, but every Monday I look at this list of names. I look at, just for 5 minutes, I look at one thing just to remind myself of one thing I want to remember or follow up on from last week. And I just schedule about a 3-minute check-in with each of them. It takes me about an hour across the week just to say, hey, I remembered last week that we said we were going to get that piece of equipment fixed for you. Did we get that fixed? Or I remember last week you were nervous about that meeting. How did it go? Or I remembered last weekend your kid was starting baseball for the first time. What was that like? And she said it was fairly natural, fairly simple, but she realized that anytime she did that, people just relaxed. They opened up. They started sharing more with her. If there was something wrong or they had an idea, they would share it. They would come to her when there was a problem. They would engage with her versus just keeping a distance like we often do from bosses. And she told me something that was really incredible. She said, Zach, there's magic in being remembered. And the reason why I like that story is because it's an example of noticing, but it's also an example of turning this from common sense to common practice. Right? That notebook was a practice. It was a tool. And we've learned that there are skills and practices like that for each of those areas, noticing, affirming, and needing, that can move this from a good intention to a robust set of actions that can be scaled in an organization by being deliberate.
Right. I loved what you wrote. Noticing people isn't the same as knowing them.
Yeah. Side, you go on your same commute every day. You know your commute, but you may not notice what's going on around you. You can know your best friend, not notice if they're struggling. You can know your team members, but not notice maybe someone's like less energized on a project they used to be really excited about. Or you might not notice that someone's feeling left out of discussions and is withdrawing subtly. Or you might not notice that somebody is having something going on in their family that's affecting their work. Noticing is a deliberate act and set of skills of seeing the ebbs and flows of people's lives at work and then offering actions to show them that they're thought about. It's also the process of asking deeper questions beyond how are you, how's your day, how's your shift going? Asking questions that people can answer. What's on your mind today? What has your attention this morning? What's been most meaningful to you today? What are you struggling with? How can I help? It's having some process of checking in on people's emotions. A lot of people say to me that leaders who are good at this, if they have a leader who's good at this, their leader often knows something's wrong before they have to say anything. It's like, Zach, I noticed that I noticed that your energy is a little bit lower. Is that right? Is there anything I can do to help? And being able to check in on people's emotions, energy, ask deeper questions, truly listen when people share their voice with you. Those are all of the key practices to making sure people feel noticed.
It's amazing. Zach, could you also tell the United story? I really loved it. I'll tell you why. I was flying to Boston from Melbourne on United. Okay. So I had my reservations when I booked the ticket because the media portrays as such, which could be true, that United States Airlines rank poorly in the global rating. So when I booked United, okay, it's a US based airline. I don't know how the experience is going to be. It's like a 20 hours flight in total. But trust me, I had such an amazing experience. Then I read your book and I thought, oh, that is someone who did some intentional action. That's
it's one of the most remarkable turnarounds in history that we haven't really talked about enough. But there's a great book on it by Oscar Munoz. He was the CEO of United Airlines at the time. The book is called Turnaround Time, and it chronicles that experience. But that turnaround, they were near the bottom in customer service, some of the bottom in flight delays and on-time departures. And within 4 years, they completely flipped around through a relentless focus on the employee experience for the benefit of the customers. And it happened when Oscar Munoz was actually doing a listening tour. And, a lot of CEOs, when they start out, they do a listening tour. And he even says, he was kind of going through the motions of the listening tour. And he went down a jet bridge and he saw this flight attendant. And he said to the flight attendant, "Hey, just want to check in on how it's going." And the flight attendant said, "Oscar, I'm just tired. I'm tired of telling people. I'm tired of telling people why they can't sit with their their passenger that they should have booked seats together. I'm tired of explaining why the coffee stinks. I'm tired of explaining why the flights aren't on time. I'm just tired. I'm sick of it." And he said that she started crying, getting emotional. And that was the moment for him that he realized that until we fix this, we can't fix anything else. But what he did is he took her, I think her name was Amy. Every time he'd do a town hall, he would share her story. And he vowed that he would not forget about this experience with Amy, and that he was doing this for her. And what happened is, so the power of this is he heard that story, but then he never let it go away. He let it follow him, and that helped everybody heard. He even said that anytime he brought up her story in front of a big town hall, everybody would sort of relax he would see just people feel that, oh, wow, someone heard somebody here, and the CEO is talking about that person, and they relentlessly pursued improving the employee experience, improving the customer experience, using the employee voice. And that's really what led to their major turnaround. But also, a lot of times we're afraid of those comments too. So leaders who help people feel noticed, help them feel heard. They help them feel that it's safe to speak up. And for some reason, his presence in that moment allowed her to be able to say that. And because she said that, also she had the courage to speak up, she was a big part of a major turnaround of a major airline that transports millions of people living important lives every day.
What a story. And let's talk a bit about how to create that culture of mattering. And you proposed a model called conducting a mattering audit. Could you talk a bit about it, please?
Yeah, I think the first step is to be able to measure it, to measure mattering. And you can do that in a number of ways. I mean, there are some scales and measurement tools. But one of the best ways is to just start out thinking about those three areas: noticing people, affirming them. Affirming people is showing them how their unique strengths make a unique difference, showing people how they're needed, making sure everybody can feel indispensable to some bigger purpose, bigger goal. But one of the best ways to do it is, if you have a leadership team or you have a team, write down employee groups' names, write down people's names on your team, and then write down what you're currently strategically doing to make sure they feel noticed. Then write down, what are you currently strategically doing to make sure they feel affirmed? And then write down what you're currently doing to help them feel needed, indispensable, relied on. And if you're not doing anything strategically, or you're not making sure your leaders have the skills to do anything in that area, leave it blank. And then go for the gaps. Go for the areas where you're like, wow, we're not doing anything strategically. We're not skill building our leaders to be able to help someone feel seen or heard. And we need to focus there. We need to focus on these people first. So that's what we call a mattering audit. I mean, one of the things that you can very easily do with your own small team is also ask this question: when you feel that you matter to me, what am I doing? So when you feel that you matter here, what are we doing? Oftentimes we do engagement surveys or climate surveys or general culture surveys, but it doesn't get at people's behaviors who do these things for us. It just gets at sentiment. I really like measuring behavior. So what are we doing? When you feel that you matter here, what am I doing? And write those things down. And as a leader, do more of those things. I also encourage leaders to self-assess themselves on the frequency of behaviors that they're doing. How frequently each week do you name people's unique gifts relative to other people on the team? How frequently each week do you check in on somebody's work details? How frequently each week do you make sure that people's tasks connect to a bigger purpose? And the goal in those assessments is not judgment. It's simply awareness. It's bringing this idea, yes, I should show people that they're valued and show them how they add value. I've never met anybody that's like, oh, that's a bad idea. right? But it's taking this inherently good idea that we know is a characteristics of good leadership. It's moving it from common sense to common practice when we move it to this assessment level and start evaluating behaviors.
And Zach, listening to you, what I understand is most of the things you talk about, the components of mattering, seems to be really simple. But the important thing is you have to do it often. You need to have that high degree of awareness. What are the challenges leaders face in embedding this practice or culture, however you call it, within organizations or within their teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that gets in the way is we've called these things soft for 50 years. And anytime you see something soft or simple, you're susceptible to an overconfidence bias. We tend to think we're better at it than we are, and we tend to not rigorously invest in it, especially invest in the skill building needed to do it, or we rely on intuition. So I'll just hire good people. They should know how to run a meeting. They should know how to say thank you. In an organization, though, intuition doesn't scale very well, right? Practices and skills scale. So one of the things that's gotten in the way is we haven't rigorously skilled people to be able to do this. For example, less than 2% of the world's population gets any formal education on how to listen well. And, I would add there's a compounding factor here. The compounding factor is that we've been systematically de-skilled on doing these things over the last 25 years, all of us, because of our reliance on digital technology to communicate with one another efficiently. Because, for example, like if I go on Slack or Teams or Zoom or whatever, and say you give me some bad news, I can just send you a sad-faced emoji now and say, sorry to hear that. I don't have to sit with you, seek understanding, show empathy, show compassion. Every time we don't have to be in that situation, researchers find we lose skills to do it. So it's called skill decay. A social skill can decay within 8 days of not using it. Think about all the people out there who have not had to show compassion to another person in real time in the last 8 days, who have not had to tell someone why they're proud of them, who have not had to say thank you to somebody in person, who have not had to check in on someone who was frustrated because they could just click leave on their virtual meeting and not see that person till next week. There's a reason why the World Economic Forum in their top 10 most in-demand skills by 2030, there's a reason why 6 of them are human skills like empathy, active listening, understanding, and the 10th is technological literacy. There's a huge need to upskill. So rigor is very important. The other thing is that I think that systems are overloading people leaders with individual contributor tasks and strategic tasks and not treating people leadership as a separate occupation. And just treating it as someone who manages individual contributors while still being an individual contributor. There's a McKinsey study that finds that just 22% of people managers' time is spent with their people. So I think we need to elevate people leadership to a separate occupation that requires a separate set of skills. And I believe that the minimum qualification to be a people leader is that you should know how to see them, hear them, value them, and show them how they're needed.
So technically, we have outsourced most of our emotional skills to emojis.
Emojis or platforms. We're more connected than ever, but we're lonelier than ever. The average US adult sends 30 to 40 text-based messages to colleagues a day at work. Yet 1 in 5 people in work say they feel isolated and lonely. 30% of people feel invisible. More people than ever feel disengaged. So we're more connected than ever, but we're lonelier than ever. And a lot of that is the result of the lower quality interactions we're having, in which we feel that someone understands us, someone sees us, someone's there for us, someone has our back. And so I believe it's a major impetus for organizations to focus robustly on systems that reskill leaders in these skills and also evaluate these skills and have a process for making sure that people who get into leadership positions must demonstrate these skills. And I'm going to add one more component. Artificial intelligence can do our operational work. It cannot take moral responsibility for what it does. It cannot build trust. It cannot care for another person. And what typically happens is the more people use a service like artificial intelligence, they'll start saying, oh, this doesn't care for me. This can't take responsibility for what it does. I need somebody to be able to build a caring and trusting relationship. And so I actually think that you will be replaced by AI if you don't have the skills to create caring and trusting relationships, because that's what we have left as human beings. And I think that's why you see those skills in high demand in the World Economic Forum report, just as an example.
Got it. If I'm a leader or imagine a CEO who's listening to this podcast, if they want to put this mattering into practice from tomorrow, what is the first step they should take?
The first step, I think, with the people around them, with their C-suite, is asking them when they most feel that they matter here and what's happening around them, what are the behaviors, and then asking them, are you exhibiting these behaviors for those below you? And then really having that conversation, are we scaling the skills necessary to deliver these behaviors in the rest of the company? Are all of our leaders skilled at these things, and where are the gaps? I think that's a really important first place to start. I would also encourage the CEO to assess themselves. Because oftentimes when you're a high level leader, like it's easy to say, oh, well, how do you think I got here? I'm good with people, right? But when you start assessing like the frequency at which, for example, you show even the people on your team how they and their inputs every day are measurably necessary for some bigger purpose, you'll start to realize there are some gaps. And the more you can say, I've realized that there are some gaps in my behavior, I want to make sure that we're all committing to this behavior. And it's a non-negotiable here that every person comes to work and feels noticed, affirmed, and needed. And that's, I think, the starting point of creating a blueprint in an organization where you're scaling this.
That's excellent. Okay, we are moving to the final segment. I call it as How I Did It. I ask a standard set of 3 questions to all my guests. First question, how do you handle differences of opinion? If someone disagrees with you, how do you usually approach it?
Yeah, I try to understand before I evaluate. So what I mean by that is that we often, especially like the higher you get in a leadership position, you often get into evaluation mode. So when somebody's sharing something with you, you're evaluating the quality of the idea, if it's a threat to you. But I constantly seek to myself, like, ask a curiosity-based question. Like, I'll say that to myself, ask a curiosity-based question. Like, what's behind that? Tell me more about that. Some great, if I have a really different opinion, I would say, like, what do you need from me to see my point of view? What do I need to do you think? What more can you provide me to where I can more fully see your point of view? And I think having that articulated intention to go into a conversation by seeking understanding before you seek to evaluate is very powerful. In the psychological research, it's called articulated intention. It helps us get off of autopilot mode, which is evaluation, and into intentional mode, we can choose to seek understanding. There's also a process called integrative listening, where so if you're in a room of people and people are disagreeing, you take parts, it's a skill, but you take parts of what each person is saying, and then you build it together to create a more cohesive, nuanced narrative of a subject. That here's what most of us agree on. Here are some nuances we should be aware of. Here are some opportunities that some people leverage. Then you build this sort of fabric of the meaning that's made in the group by integrating. And that's something that takes a lot of practice.
That's amazing. Second question, what are 1 or 2 key skills essentials for business leaders who are operating today?
I think one of the skills is to make sure that people measurably see how they and their tasks, no matter how small, ladder to some bigger, meaningful purpose or goal. I think too many people today feel like a cog in somebody else's machine. And when people feel replaceable, they tend to act replaceable. They don't show up. They don't commit. They lose energy. They quote unquote quiet quit. And I think that there are many people doing very small parts of jobs now, in large organizations especially, that have forgotten to see how it connects to something bigger. So that skill of laddering people up to something bigger can make sure that this split that sometimes happens between what someone's doing and why and who they're doing it with does not occur. So I think keeping those things tightly coupled, the why and the who and the what, are really essential for recommitting people to the work.
It's amazing. I really loved the ice cream story with your daughter, though it's a bit far from what you said, but it's basically showing the impact of someone's work is a huge
Yeah, you should be able to
factor.
show proof of impact. I'll give a very quick story. I was working with a national park manager, supervisor, and he was able to turn morale around on this maintenance team in this very large set of national parks in the West. And he had this practice where every week he would go take pictures of projects his team worked on. So if it was a bridge that was repaired by his team, he would take a picture of it. If there was a family walking on a trail that was reopened, he would take a picture. And he would send an email every Friday. And the subject line of the email was just, "Look what you did." And then he attached the photos. And he said to me that, my people can't question whether they matter. I give them photographic evidence every week. He was joking around. But it was really profound because I think the other skill is giving people proof of impact. And this is why I often say that, good leaders tell people that they matter. Good organizations tell people that they matter. Our people are our greatest asset, or we value our people. But really great leaders tend to have the skills to show them exactly how they matter. And I think that's where the skill comes in, to give people proof of impact.
Awesome. One book you recommend to our listeners?
I actually don't read much in my genre, like the leadership, psychology, positive psychology genre. But the one book I recommend to everybody is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And what it shows two things. Number one, that even in the face of abject difficulty and suffering, that you have a choice of how you see what you're going through. And one of the choices that he made when he was a prisoner in that situation was to help others whenever he could. But the second thing that he made a choice of was to constantly think of why he was going through what he was going through. What was the end outcome? If he made it through, what would he be able to do? We call this a so that mindset. He had a so that mindset. His mindset was, I'm going to get through this so that I can be with my wife again. But he went into studying vocational psychology because he said the same thing. Most people work, and most sources of work are drudgery and are difficult. And he wanted to help people see that to make an influence in their circle, to experience more meaning in their lives. So I think it's a great just depiction of how we can do it individually, remember that we matter, but how we can also remember we matter by showing other people how they matter, even in difficulty.
Zach, may I tell you, it's such a pleasure to read your work. And I prepare for many podcasts, but yours is one of the work which I took a lot of benefit professionally. So thank you so much for such a profound work. And it's great to sit with you today and discuss some of the ideas from your book. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
That wraps up this episode of Business and Society. Zach shared some powerful insights on practical ways leaders can build a culture of significance. It seems when people feel they matter, motivation, engagement, and performance all soar. To learn more, check out his book and his Harvard Business Review article. I've left links in the description for both. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.